our next speaker?
Yeah, the next presentation will be given by Siegmar Otto from the University Hohenheim and Otto from Goethe University Magdeburg in Germany. His research focuses, amongst other, on the measurements of nature connectedness, environmental psychology, and sustainable development. This presentation will give insight into the motivation for sustainable behavior, and knowledge alone is not enough to foster nature connectedness. Siegmar, please, the floor is yours. You have to unmute, Siegmar. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes that still happens, even though we're all used so much to virtual presentations. So anyway, welcome again, now with my voice, with my sound, to my presentation on nature connectedness and environmental education. And thank you, Jan Willem, for introducing me, and Arjen for preparing the ground for my presentation and probably also the following presentations. I'm pretty comfortable with questions within the presentation. If you have some really urgent questions, just turn on your microphone and ask, but you can also collect them for the end, towards the end of the presentation. So, first of all, I have to tell you that I want to present to you something different in the first part of my presentation, and which is basically why nature connectedness and the work you are doing is so important for sustainable development. And I'm really passionate about that, because from my research, from a psychological perspective, based on research on motivation, what people do for sustainable development, nature connectedness is actually the most important ingredient to create a sustainable society. Actually, there's nothing else that can help to do that. And then in the second part, and I will show you why that is the case in the first part, and in the second part, I will show you how we can increase nature connectedness from a psychological, pedagogical perspective, and why not just promoting knowledge, but also promote nature connectedness with environmental education that is situated in nature is so important. And they'll give you some really strong empirical evidence about these things. So let's come to why nature connectedness is so important for sustainable development. What we see in policies which aim to foster sustainable development is that most of them, with a lot of amounts of money, focus on technological efficiency increases to reduce, for instance, primary energy consumption. And you can see that with mobility, electric cars. The system pumps a lot of money into producing electric cars, even though there are many other side effects. And if you look in Germany, just now there have been a few news articles talking about how those members of the Green Party, who actually proposed that they're green, drive around with these big, huge electric SUVs. And I say this is not very helpful in terms of sustainable development, even though they promote this thing and they want to be elected for these things. And the reason I criticize that is, if you look at the chart here of the primary energy consumption for our economies, despite all these focuses on efficient technology, energy consumption actually didn't really reduce, and CO2 output neither. So, because many of these CO2 outputs are transferred to China, for instance, where they produce our goods. But this is just some example. Now let's go more into individual behavior. And I think this is a very impressive example of how technological improvements, efficiency increases, are simply consumed by people because they can afford it, because more efficient technology makes more things more affordable. So if you look at light, light is the thing most people of us really need and use. I think especially in the Nordic countries, you have less daylight and you have to illuminate your buildings, your streets, and also Germany, of course, and other countries and parts of the world. And what you see here is an economic study on the cost of producing light. Not the cost of producing electricity, but the cost of producing light, which is basically one-on-one with the efficiency of light generation. In the 1800s, people were still walking around with torches, with candles, and then in the 1900s, Edison invented the light bulb, and so the cost for lighting reduced significantly. At the same time, the amount of light that is used by people, and this is the right side, the red graph, the red line, increased substantially. Lumen in hours is like a measure of how much light you use. So with reducing costs of light production, light consumption increased. And this shows that people, if they can, just consume. And this is basically what I want to address now. This is sustainability or environmental motivation as counteracting this consumption impulse, this impulse to be more affluent. Just one last example. I think the youngest of you, they don't know those old TV sets, those bunky, chunky things, which would use much more electric energy than the new flat screens. But basically what I want to show here is that now you have the choice between a smaller flat screen, which consumes less energy and is still much better than the old ones, and a large flat screen. But if you look into the living rooms of most people, they have huge flat screens with sizes of like 55, 65 inches because they can afford it. So to sum it up, the purpose of consumption goods, of mobility, of course, fridges and houses is not to save energy, as some people want to tell us. They basically are means to satisfy our plethora of goals and dreams. And if you look into yourself, how many goals you have, you want to travel, you want to experience things, you want to spend time, leisure time. For all these things, you have to travel, you need to consume things, and you produce CO2, for instance. So ecological behavior, where I guess most of you are pretty high on the scale, is for most individuals not the prime goal. So additional consumption and rebound is the norm. If you give more efficient technology, people will not use it to use less energy. They will just use it to increase their comfort, to travel faster, to travel further, to travel more. This is what you really should keep in mind if you talk about strategies to foster sustainable development. And what we do about it as psychologists, we can measure how costly these behaviors are to save the environment. And for instance, you can recycle paper. In Germany, this is really easy behavior because everybody does it. But to donate money, not many people do it. It's very difficult behavior because you give away your wealth. You give your money away to an environmental organization. So this is very costly individual behavior. And we simply ask people what of these behaviors they do to help the environment. And then we can rank these behaviors transitively. And these are just some examples of the difficulty of these behaviors. And on the other side, we have people's motivation. And people who are highly motivated, like on the top level, they do most these things. And people who are not so motivated, they might recycle paper or use energy efficient appliances, which is very easy. And most of the people are in the medium range, so they do 50% of these behaviors. And what you can do if you want to reach a sustainable society is, of course, you can, what most policies try to do now, reduce the costs of sustainable behavior, like introducing energy efficient light bulbs. And therefore, more people do it, because it's easier. It's got not so much cost involved. And at the same time, they save money, because if you have an energy efficient light bulb, it consumes less energy, your electricity bill is lower, and then you have more money. And then what do you do with it? You go on another vacation trip and spend it on a flight. So in the end, you're maybe not more pro-environmental. That's the same for electric cars, which other colleagues found out. So this is one thing. And I think this is a very problematic thing, what our policies do right now, because it's connected with rebound effects, which actually, and overall, will not help us to become more sustainable. The other option, however, is you could increase, and this is the left side. Do you see my pointer anyway? Okay, so this is the left side, the red arrow. You could increase environmental motivation. And if you do that without any side effects, almost any of those sustainable behaviors will become more likely. And this is where nature-based education, where nature connectedness comes into play. Because what we found out so far as psychologists is that only a large nature connectedness can increase actually sustainable behavior. This is the only safe way so far. So now I want to talk about how we can increase environmental motivation, because this is a very good solution to sustainable development issues. And now I come back to our topic, sustainable education, environmental education. And the challenge here is that just providing knowledge shows that environmental knowledge only explains 6% of ecological behavior. So if you go into the classroom and teach people geography, which is system knowledge on climate zones and things, if you even teach them how to separate waste, or if you teach them what is more effective, like reusing a shopping bag or not flying, which is effectiveness knowledge, it only has a really small effect on actual behavior, like 6%, which is not big, right? I think you all agree. And I think you experienced that as well in your classrooms. And you could see it in a way that an intelligent person can use his or her intelligence for many different things. It's a motivational factor that really makes her intelligence to translate into ecological behavior. And this is connectedness to nature. And you see here, this relates with 0.454, and the highest would be 1 to ecological behavior. And it explains together with knowledge, not just 6%, but 34%, which is in terms of social science, a very large share. So if we put connectedness to nature into the equation, we can explain a lot of ecological behavior. And obviously, if we increase connectedness to nature, we can increase sustainable behavior, ecological behavior, and in the end, sustainable lifestyles. So the question is, how can you do that? And I made a study where we looked at nature-based environmental education that also fosters connectedness to nature and motivation, and not just knowledge. And for instance, this is a German website of the Ökowerk. These are environmental educational sites where students, where pupils, where children go there, and they have classes about how to work with the soil, also about bees and many, many other things. And they learn things about the environment. These are basically very comparable to your approaches, I guess. And so students learn about the environment. This is the knowledge part, but they also are engaged into nature. Their connectedness increases. So this is the design of the study. We have here those two components I just introduced: environmental knowledge, connectedness to nature, affecting ecological behavior. And what we wanted to see is how participation in these programs, in these ecological education sites, nature-based environmental education, affects connectedness as well as knowledge, and then in the end, ecological behavior. This is our equation. And I want to go into the statistical details, but in the end, this was our questionnaire, 20 items on connectedness to nature, 11 items on environmental knowledge. And we asked the students how often they visited these environmental educational sites. And then we also had a questionnaire on ecological behavior. We asked 4th to 6th grade students in 5 schools in the city of Berlin, and we had 255 participants. So what we found is that nature-based environmental education based in these institutions affected not just environmental knowledge, which was obviously expected, but even more so connectedness to nature, or let's say to about the same degree, 0.2, 0.3. At the same time, connectedness to nature and environmental knowledge explained the variance in ecological behavior by 71%. So this is a very large number. And this is basically due to the relation of connectedness to nature and ecological behavior. And this is not the final proof of the causal relation because it's just a correlation study, but it's a first step, a first start to show how important nature-based environmental education is for ecological behavior to foster a sustainable society. So, well, I think I'm pretty well within my 20 minutes and I will sum up my findings. So, first of all, society and individuals focus on the efficiency strategy. This is basically what policy does these days. Also, all those green parties who promote ecology, because most of them can afford it because it costs a lot of money as well. But this is not enough for an overall sustainable development. We also need people who forego personal comfort, who are more sufficient, because these efficiency strategies, they cause rebound effects. And in the end, I doubt that this will lead to a more sustainable society. This was my first part. And therefore, I say also individual ecological motivation is very essential for a sustainable society. And the only way so far which we know to foster this motivation is to foster it through nature-based environmental education with anything which happens in nature, including bees, including soil, including many other organisms, and also knowledge about geography, system knowledge as well. But this has to happen in nature or close to nature because you also have to foster nature connectedness as the major driver of ecological behavior, ecological motivation. So, thank you so far. I'm open for questions.
Any questions? Well, anyhow, it made very clear how that we have to motivate people, and it showed the importance of connectedness. And that's also the problem with our school system, because through our school system you don't reach any connectedness. And what's your idea about the school system?
Yeah, I mean, I've got many ideas about that, obviously, because I'm working in this domain. And I've got a collaborative project with a pedagogical school in Ludwigsburg. And there we actually develop a broad measurement tool to measure the outcome of education in schools. It is like a German program to monitor sustainable development. And finally, they got the idea that what people learn and how they are motivated should be a very essential part of this monitoring, because as I said, this is an important influential variable. I'm not the expert for designing such programs, but basically what you see here is that the more you can bring students out into nature, or you might even bring nature into the classroom with, I don't know, with prototypes of things, with plants, trees, or with school gardening as well. I've got a collaboration with a school gardening project in Germany, Academia, and they also try to bring students more closer to nature, So I'm not the expert on designing these things, but the major advice is to really bring students more closer to nature in classroom or outside the classroom.
Yeah, it's but it's interesting that in the Western world we are is silo thinking. So we think either you are in school or you are in nature, but why can't we combine them? So there are a lot of countries where they have, for instance, mathematics in nature or language lessons, and somehow we're stuck in an old system. I think there's a lot to improve, and I think we really would like to promote for the curriculum of at least the primary schools to go out at least one day a week.
Yeah, I'm not the expert in that. But I'm aware of that. The school system is a very, at least in Germany, slow changing system, and you have many mindsets which are not very compatible with what most of you, I think, and what I just introduced. But yeah, this is a political issue, and I just deliver the proof how important it would be to go in this direction.
Yeah.
I would like to ask if you have when is nature connectedness ever going to outweigh economical incentives?
Probably never. But you can increase it, and it's a matter of level.
But that's definitely a quite harsh statement, isn't it?
Yeah, but if you want to change it, you have to face the reality. And yeah, I mean, I've got another study. I don't know if it's in the references, but we compared the ecological motivation from 2001 to 2010, and it increased actually due to the climate crisis because people got more aware. But these are small steps, but these small steps actually increase the likelihood of all ecological behavior. So this is a good thing. And I'm saying it does probably never surpass the effectiveness of economic interventions, because if you look at electric cars, like you just pump in money and people just buy it, or of course you can also always do it by law. You can prohibit things, then the effect is immediate and people have no other choice other than maybe breaking the law, and this is what most people wouldn't do to harm the environment. So to be honest, such rules are always more effective than motivation. But the other side is, if more people are motivated, if more people are more ecologically motivated, the system changes. More green parties grow up, and more green parties means that they introduce these economic measures to foster green behavior and maybe even to set up rules for more green behavior. So it's a process that is connected pretty much as well. So for instance, with Greta Thunberg and Fridays for Futures, these are actually these are motivated students who actually have an effect on the policy agenda. And so via this policy agenda, you can also, of course, increase the motivation. So it's a very complex system. But what I'm saying is that ecological motivation is always good to foster sustainable development without side effects.
I think there's room for one more question. Was there Margareta? Did you have one? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, please. Thank you for your presentation. I'm struggling with a question about choices that people make in their life. Like now we just look at nature and we look at children, what they do, but and what people use, like light and cars and flights and things like that. But my question is, like, I don't see anything about choices for people that they can directly influence nature, like, for instance, vegetarian or vegan choices. How is that far from your research, or is that a choice? Or
No,
I would like to know something about that.
it's totally in line with our research. I just gave you some examples, some items, but one other item would be, oh, it's not there yet, but another item, we've got many items, like over 50 to 100 items asking these things, and being a vegetarian is one of them. And it's about here at a higher range, because only 10% in Germany do that. And we also made a study where we gave an incentive in the Mensa and the university to choose the vegetarian option. And this was a proof that behavioral costs, like because the vegetarian option costs less than, could increase the likelihood of people choosing it.
Okay.
So it's basically also the same thing with any other of these items, that if you pay for vegetarian options in the Mensa, for instance, if it's cheaper, more people choose it, but only people with a high motivation, because this is a very personal issue not to eat meat. Yeah, it's totally in line with our research.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Somehow it's depressing, but but we also see there is, if we motivate people and we increase the connectedness, we can reach something, and we definitely need more Greta's. That's for sure.
Just let me say one thing. I wouldn't say it's what do you say, depressing. I think especially for you, it is very engaging and motivating, because you're the only ones who actually can increase environmental motivation. If you're educators, if you working with students, you're the most important people in this respect. And my research delivers you the proof that you are. So
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. For us, it's totally motivating. So
okay, good. Thank you.
yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Welcome.
And due to the schedule, we have to go on.